Hello, BookTube. Well, the weather here in Boston is supposed to turn a little cool tomorrow. It's supposed to drop by a few degrees Fahrenheit. And I thought that was a good enough reason to go to the Brattle Bookshop first thing this morning and get a pile of books. So that's what I did. Those of you who are new to the channel don't know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a used bookstore in downtown Boston that is terrific. I've been going there for ever and ever and ever. and they have 3 floors of used books, all reasonably priced, just jam-packed in there on every subject under the sun except romance. And they also have a sale lot right next door. There's a lot right next door to the building that's the floor plan of an entire other building. So it's thousands and thousands and thousands more books, all for either $1, $3, or $5. I spent a lot of time out in the sale lot. Once upon a time, my sale lot experiences were bracketed with discomfort because shopping out in the sale lot during the summer is grotesquely hot, and shopping out in the sale lot during the winter is grotesquely uncomfortable because it's out in the open. Now, my sale lot shopping is not grotesquely bracketed. There is no temperature high enough during the summer to make me uncomfortable out there. But the winter, oh my, the winter is coming. And it's going to be bad. It's always brutal when you're out there and you're so cold. Of course, I could just not go. Anyway, so we have a lot of stuff to look at here. Just a pile of books. I want to stress again something I always say in connection with the Brattle, especially given the size of this pile, which is that it's like a tide. It's like a tide washing onto the shore. And occasionally it washes up something, but mostly it just comes and then goes, comes and then goes. That's kind of what I like to think of my shopping at the Brattle as, like a tide, where I'm not even remotely thinking about keeping all of these books. Not at all. I will read them for a season or for a year or for 2 years. Some of them will come in this little book room, but most of them won't. And that'll be that. Then they'll either be in too bad a shape to be resold, in which case they will be gently but affectionately thrown away, or they will go right back to the Brattle Bookshop, or to, some charity shop, or to some of you. I am very well aware of the fact that you need to keep the books going out as well as coming in. So when this is an exorbitant pile. It was literally as much as I could carry. When you look at this pile, don't think that I've just got books all the way up to the ceiling here at Hyde Cottage. I don't. I'm keeping control of these things. So we'll start with a whole bunch of mass market paperbacks, including this first one. This is old Del Rey paperback, Dower K. Sweet cover. This is, or Michael Whelan, I think. Yeah, no, this is Michael Whelan. This is Barbara Hambly, and this is her book Dragon's Bane. A big epic fantasy of hers about, well, it's been a long time since I read this. This was the 1980s, I think. 1985, yeah. And there's a quest to kill a dragon that is terrorizing a town, and 2 people are deputized for that quest. But it turns out that there's a lot more to the dragon than that. One thing I very much do remember from this book is that the dragon is the most memorable and complex character. So I was happy to have it again with this lovely old mass market paperback. I had this once upon a time. I paid my $3.95 for it. And then it disappeared along with 9/10 of all my other science fiction and fantasy. Then these next 3 were rebuys. They are doubles, or maybe even in some cases triples. In fact, do I have one of them in this room? Yes, I do. Because I couldn't let them go. I am somewhat brutal on my books, especially on paperbacks. So if I see mass market paperback copies of older books, these are 50 years old, I'm going to grab them. I found a bunch of Cordwainer Smith. The science fiction author Cordwainer Smith. I found The Instrumentality of Mankind, where somebody's very helpfully written on the cover in permanent magic marker that it costs $1. I'll see what I can do to get that off of there. I'm thinking that I probably can. And then somebody also did the same thing with this old the Del Rey Best of series. They did one of their best books was the Best of Cordwainer Smith, with a Dower K. Sweet cover showing a lot of the characters from these stories. If you know the stories that are in this book, this has The Ballad of Lost Samel, this has Mother Hitton's Little Kittens, and Alpha Boulevard, and Scanners Live in Vain. If you know those characters, then you'll recognize a lot of them from this cover. This was $1.15. I will try to get that off there, and as you can see, that is up there. There's a double right here in this room, but that's okay. I won't get any more copies. And then the last one I got is Nostralia, Cordwainer Smith's novel about a world that has giant, sick, mutated sheep and a substance that grows on them, strewn, the Santa Clara drug, imparts effective immortality to humans, and so is the most valuable commodity anywhere in the universe. And this is about a young guy, a young person from Australia who becomes so fantastically rich speculating in strewn that he can buy the planet Earth. And a whole bunch of his adventures ensue. This has a publication history that's worthy of a novel on its own, but this is a book. This is at least a coherent novel version of all the different parts and segments and additions and rewritings and whatnot that have happened to this book. I consider it to be a great science fiction novel. So I got all these old Del Rey Cordwainer Smiths that I couldn't resist. They were there. They were in perfect condition. Look at this best of Cordwainer Smith. It's in perfect condition. You'd never guess. When did this come out? Aside from the obnoxious writing on the cover, this came out in 1975. That's a long time ago. That's 50 years ago. This looks just fine. So I got those, and then we can go to fiction. And one is historical fiction. This I just couldn't pass up. It's Patrick O'Brien. It's his Aubrey and Maturin series of Napoleonic seafaring adventures starring Lucky Jack Aubrey, who's an immense and very likable British sea captain, and his best friend, the surgeon and also intelligence operative Stephen Maturin. And I have all of the Aubrey and Maturin books in their original American hardcover run with the same artwork on every cover and the deckled edges, and I have all of those but one. And as usual, despite the fact that I have a notebook right there in my pocket in the form of a phone, I have not notated which one I do not have. And so when I saw this paperback, I thought, okay, well, it's not the form that you want, but you can at least grab it in case it's the one that you want. It's not. I got Desolation Island, which is terrific. Absolutely terrific as a novel. Just amazing. A large chunk of the narrative here was freely adapted for Russell Crowe's movie. This has a large chunk of the action there. It's about a Dutch vessel that is pursuing the Leopard here under the command of Jack Aubrey. But it's not Desolation Island that I need. I believe it's Treason's Harbor. Treason's Harbor, I think, is the one that I need. And I don't need it in a mass market paperback anyway. Then another mass market that I got is a novel, contemporary fiction from, I want to say the 80s, the early 80s, is that right? 1977, or 1976, thereabouts. This is Vance Bourgeois. I have no idea. This is his book, Now Playing at Canterbury, a big fat thing. I have no idea why Vance Bourgeois is forgotten. I have no idea. Comparisons, during the height of his literary career, comparisons were made freely between him and other great canonical American writers, and yet nothing of his is still in print, and he is not read nor talked about, and has no living favorites left. This is my favorite of all the things that he wrote. It's his biggest book, I think, his biggest novel. And it's a gigantic, playful, multi-voice story about the staging of an opera in a university town in the Midwest that is obviously Iowa City. Vance Bourgeois taught at the Iowa Writers Workshop for quite some time. And Iowa City is clearly depicted in this book, as are two people, one of whom was a dear friend of mine and one of whom was a dear enemy of mine. And yet, despite the fact that they are in this book and very, very noticeably themselves, I still nominate this. That's not the reason that I nominate this or the Iowa City setting as, I think, one of the great novels of the second half of the 20th century. I think if I were to make a list of 50 such novels from after the war, this would be one of them, easily. And I don't have a hardcover of this. I don't have a trade paperback of this. This has largely been forgotten. I'm sure there hasn't been a reprint of it in decades. And I doubt there ever will be again. So when I see it, I grab it. I have been loving this book, rereading it forever. The school hires a down-on-his-luck perpetually scruffy producer to get this opera onto stage. And he is one of the most, I mean, the book is absolutely crammed with memorable characters, but he's one of the most memorable ones of all. The things that he does to get that opera on stage it's wonderful. And because Vance Bourgeois learned his craft thoroughly from beginning to end, unlike today's modern writers of fiction, he doesn't just forget that he's writing a novel. He doesn't just walk out the door at the end of the thing. He gives it an ending that is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So those were the two contemporary novels, fiction, that I got. Then we'll move back to fantasy to finish out the mass market paperbacks. Because I saw this thing, The Spell of Conan, which is an anthology of Conan pastiches, Conan nonfiction, Conan meditations, Conan essays, a couple of Conan stories by L. Sprague de Camp, who did a lot of work to popularize the Conan writings of Robert E. Howard. And this is, you can't really tell from on camera, but this has a sort of a matte finish cover and has all kinds of guest contributions. Who is in here? L. Sprague de Camp, Fritz Leiber. There's a couple of Western stories by Robert E. Howard. Ray Capella, Fritz Leiber again. Stories, and also nonfiction meditations. I love this thing, and I got it at the Brattle just recently, but I could not. This was one of maybe 3 or 4 such books, very much not novels. They were very much made not to make sure no one thought they were novels. They are books about Conan. They have fictional excerpts, fictional stories that are reprinted, but they're not, Conan and the Spider God or anything like that. And I want all of these again. I once had them all. I have no idea where they all are, but I got this thing because when I saw 2 of them, I could not remember whether or not this was one of the ones that I had, so I grabbed it. This is the one that I have. But the one that I didn't have is this one, The Blade of Conan. Same thing. It's about 30% longer, but it's the same kind of thing. Oh, look at that. Oh, there's an old paperback Booksmith bookmark in here. How wonderful. Dedicated to the fine art of browsing. Does it say that on here? Yes, it does. Dedicated to the fine art of browsing. Paperback Booksmith. Long gone, but blessed be their memory. So now I have 2 of these things. And I think there's one more. No idea what it's called. Don't remember. But as long as I was on a Conan run, I grabbed this next thing here. This is by Ballantine Books. I've shown you before on this channel. Ballantine Books did a 3-volume sort of set of Conan trade paperbacks that reprinted the Conan stories in the order in which they were published, in the way in which they were published. Robert E. Howard originally meant the Conan stories to be non-chronological. He meant to sort of, here is this gigantic, sprawling, epic life of a thief, a reaver, and a slayer who had gigantic mirths and gigantic melancholies. And he was all things in his life, all kinds of adventures that he had. So Howard just sort of dropped his narrative down at any given point in Conan's life. And when L. Sprague de Camp, the aforementioned L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter, sort of made a set of books with great Frank Frazetta artwork, iconic Frank Frazetta cover artwork, they smoothed things over and padded things out and regularized things in a way that introduced thousands and thousands of readers to Conan, and I think made Conan a superstar. I don't think it was Robert E. Howard that did that. I think it was L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter. But it did remove some of the feeling of Howard's original conception of his great character. And Ballantine went back and did volumes, The Coming of Conan, The Bloody Crown of Conan, that recaptured that restored that original chronology, and also stripped away a lot of any of the verbal excess that L. Sprague de Camp may have imported into these books. They also made them very nice. They made them very intentionally pulpy by giving them all kinds of black and white illustrations. Those Ballantine volumes are great. They are fantastic. They belong in any Conan library. And I found a Ballantine Conan book today that I don't think I've ever had. No, I don't think I've ever had this thing. This is the best of Robert E. Howard, Volume 1. Was there a Volume 2? I don't have any idea. I should ask Michael K. Vaughan. But this is the same thing. Let me get you an example here. This is the same thing where there are spot illustrations and full page illustrations throughout the book. Let's get you. I just passed another full page illustration. There's another full page illustration, but there are also. Let me slow down a little to get. Yeah, there are spot illustrations here as well. And this isn't. This is all sorts of bits and pieces that the editors sort of put together, because doing a best of Robert E. Howard is kind of a tradition. We have Curse of the Golden Skull, Red Shadows, One Black Stain. Anything really? The Grey God Passes, Worms of the Earth. Yeah, there's a lot in here, and it's not necessarily just Conan, and far from it. Great, fantastic. So this will be this is a great anthology to go along with those Ballantine volumes, which I have here somewhere. I don't know exactly where they are, but I'm sure that I do. I'd never seen this before, and for $1, I was certainly going to grab it. The only thing I'm wondering now is there a volume 2 or volume 3 that I could get? Then the next one is a callback to bygone days. This will not be familiar to most of you. Once upon a time, there was an incredibly best-selling novel when you worked in bookstores. It was the only thing that every other customer wanted. It was called The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. And it made its author a pile of money, a mint of money. It was a runaway bestseller in the way that bestsellers are sometimes not very predictable. And that author is Sloan Wilson, and he wrote a book called Away from It All. Where there's our author as a young man. He wrote a book where he and his wife buy a vacation property 10 years after the publication of The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, and this is a nonfiction work about that, about escaping from it all. Of course, Sloan Wilson didn't get away from it all. The worst thing in the world that he could have brought to his work, to his apartment, to his house, to his getaway house was alcohol, and he did. Endless rivers of it. But I've never read this. I read the Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, didn't think all that much of it. Would love to find a copy and reread it, good Lord. But I've never read this. And even though The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit didn't really do much for me, I certainly noticed that the writer knows what he's doing. So I'm looking forward to it. And I try always in any big Brattle haul to get at least a few books that I haven't already read myself. One of the great things about the Brattle sale lot is that everything is so cheap. You can take a wild flyer on just about anything, and you won't be out much money. Like, for instance, this next one, which is a subject that interests me greatly, but I've never actually read this book. This is by Darrell Pinkson, and it's called Marlowe's Ghost: The Blacklisting of the Man Who Was Shakespeare. And I believe that subtitle is probably a callback to something that we saw on this channel just the other day. Probably they came from the same seller. We saw a book called The Man Who Was Shakespeare, in which the author puts I got its sequel first. As the way it often happens at the Brattle, you will get the follow-ups to a book before you see the original book. Just keep your hopes up, because you almost certainly will see the original book. I got The Murder of the Man Who Was Shakespeare first, and then I found a copy of The Man Who Was Shakespeare, which is a book that vociferously puts forward that Christopher Marlowe survived his death, in Deptford, and was responsible for the plays attributed to the man from Stratford. And this book clearly wants to look at that. It clearly wants to respond to that and continue it. I'm pretty sure that this author thinks that Marlowe wrote the plays of Shakespeare. Of course, if you're going to think that, you have to take on board two things. We have a coroner's inquest for Christopher Marlowe. A vivid description of what his body looked like. Vivid description of the affray in the tavern in Deptford. Sworn testimony. If you believe that Marlowe wrote the plays attributed to the man from Stratford, you have to believe that all of that was faked. Maybe even elaborately so, maybe very deliberately so. The people that tend to make a case for Marlowe tend to point out that he was, at the time of his death, one of the foremost, if not the foremost, writers in all of England, and there was barely any mention of it. It's an odd thing. It would cause a lot. You would think it would cause a lot more commentary than it did. But the second thing you need to take on board is a little bit bigger, and I'm sure that the bulk of this book will be about it, which is that if Marlowe wrote the plays of Shakespeare, a lot of the dating of the plays of Shakespeare has to be wrong. This is where Shakespeare conspiracy theorists tend to zero in on the dating of the plays anyway, because it scotches almost every candidate. The foremost candidate right now, Marlowe used to be, Bacon used to be. The foremost candidate right now is Edward de Vere, the Earl of Oxford. And even there, the dating of the play scuppers that completely, unless you believe that before he died, Oxford wrote The Merry Wives of Windsor and King Lear and The Tempest and whatnot, and just had them some sort of arrangement with a factotum to hand one to the players every single year. Unless you're willing to believe something utterly nonsensical than that, you have to believe, if you settle on an author who isn't William Shakespeare, you have to redate the plays. I imagine that's what a lot of this will do. Can't wait. I'm always up for it. Then this next one was a surprise, but the Brattle will provide. I was up in Vermont, 2 years ago? We were with Mark Richardson and his family, and we were hunting around at charity shops and used bookstores and everything, as we always did. Like we don't both have more books than we can shake a stick at. And one time when we were at one of those places, I found something just as I was finished looking. I found a history of the Napoleonic Wars. This thing, The War of Wars by Robert Harvey. Some of you with very long memories will remember that I hauled a hardcover of this on this channel probably 4 years ago, and promptly got rid of it. To one of you who watched that haul, I had that hardcover on my desk, and I got rid of it. This is a big, sweeping thing, just amazingly done. It's just amazingly done. Some of you may have seen the video that I did with Jason Harrigan, where he talked about, for instance, he drastically downsized his book collection, and one of the things that he downsized was his vast collection of Napoleonic warfare books. And one of the very sensible reasons that he gave for doing that is that a lot of them get very samey. And I agree. This jumps out at me on every page. Actually, I have it here. Yes, I have it here. This was the paperback, or what's left of it, of what I got in Vermont. I had to reinforce it with tape. It's dirty, it's stained, and it's falling apart. The pages in the front, no matter what I do, the pages in the front are going to come out. I still managed to get a read out of this. But the whole time that I did it, I was thinking, boy, it would be great if I could find a better copy, and I did. This thing's in perfect condition. Doesn't need to be reinforced or anything like that. So I can give the old copy a dignified burial and just use this one instead. The next 3 books are science fiction book club editions, I believe. I'm pretty sure that one of them is. None of them are exactly marked that way, but I'm pretty sure that one of them is. Mark Richardson and Jason Harrigan and science fiction. Sean Stanfast probably as well. No, they know all sorts of science to look at these things and tell that they're book club editions. I'm going just by the fact that I've never seen them in bookstores. I used to work in bookstores. I never saw these things. I have to assume they were custom made for the subscribers to a club. And I've had most of these book club editions in the past many times. But there's a sort of a block of them that seems to be coming up from the basement of the Brattle these days. So I got 3 of them. For old time's sake, maybe, but also because I really like them. The first one I got is Gordon Dixon. This is 3 to Dorsai. I have been looking at this cover for 50 years without having any idea what it means. What does that mean? That's a bald man? That's an old man? The arm is going through the old man's head, but passing behind the bald man. The ripped young man has a loincloth on, but also he seems to have metal in his legs. I have no idea what this cover means, but this is an anthology of 3 Dorsai books. This has Necromancer, Tactics of Mistake, and Dorsai. And this edition came out, again, probably 50 years ago, 1975. The Gordon Dixon's Dorsai books, his what later disastrously became known as his child cycle, had a great idea and ran it into the ground. Who would have guessed? But the idea was basically that in the future, humanity has splintered to a whole bunch of different worlds, and each one of those worlds has developed a kind of specialty of its own, which it trades with the other worlds. And the humans who went to the rocky, almost barren planetoid called the Dorsai have no resources or skills to trade with the rest of humanity, except the blood and bones and daring of their young men and women, who through selective breeding and the harsh atmosphere of the Dorsai, and also lots and lots of training, become the foremost soldiers in this human world, and therefore are able to sustain their world by hiring out as mercenaries and military advisors and whatnot. And this is Necromancer, Tactics of Mistake, and especially Dorsai with an exclamation point, were the world's introduction to those things. Then they went on from there. There was a collection of novellas called The Spirit of Dorsai. There was a book called Lost Dorsai, about a Dorsai who doesn't want to fight. And there was also a book called Soldier Ask Not, which I think is one of the best things Gordon Dixon ever wrote. But after that, after those, the Dorsai books, if you want to call them that, continued for probably 6 or 8 more books, but they got longer and longer and worse and worse. I defy you to get through the Gordon Dixon Child Cycle book called The Final Encyclopedia. I defy you to get through it. I did. But I found getting through that book significantly harder than getting through L. Ron Hubbard's Battlefield Earth. It was no picnic. These 3 books, though, I haven't read Necromancer, for instance, in forever. I haven't read Tactics of Mistake in forever. Dorsai, I repeatedly go back to. And now I have this, which I'm assuming is a science fiction book club edition. This was never for sale in a bookstore. Pretty sure, right? Yeah, no folderol on the back. Probably no price either. Yeah, no price. So I'm assuming that. And then these next 2, also science fiction book club editions, I'm almost certain. I saw, I think it was Mark Richardson, held up one something like cover art for this, and I thought it was familiar. And it turns out I just had to wait long enough. The Brattle, you just have to wait long enough. This is Philip Jose Farmer. He was a contemporary of Gordon Dixon, and probably a couple of other people we have here is probably contemporary of Robert E. Howard. He was known by all the greats, and he left a large body of work behind, and I've never really come to terms with it. I hate to say it, but most of the stuff that I've read by him, and I think I've read almost everything, has been fair to middling, maybe even tinging on the bad. Except for 2 nonfiction works that he did. He did a book called Tarzan Alive, which is a nonfiction retelling of the life and adventures of Tarzan as pieced together through the novels. And he did the same thing for Doc Savage, his Violent Life, Doc Savage, his something or other life, which did the same thing and was amazing. Those 2 nonfiction works are amazing. But I'm going to give him another try. I'm going to give a lot of his work another try. And this is not his most famous series. This is his second most famous series. This is The World of Tears, which I found in these Science Fiction Book Club editions in 2 volumes. Volume 1 has a Boris Vallejo cover in which our 2 main characters have no clothes on and are facing trouble. And this has, which books does this have? He just strikes me as pot boilers. This has The Maker of Universes and The Gates of Creation, which, if I remember correctly, Boris Vallejo also illustrated in mass market paperbacks. I think I once upon a time had a box set of all of the... I'm not going to scream. So I think I once had a box set of those mass market paperbacks, all with beautiful Boris Vallejo covers. This was not one of them. I think this was done for this edition, maybe? I don't know. It would take a book historian. But this is volume 1. And then in volume 2, our hero and heroine have found some clothes. So there's volume 2, where they are facing a magic tree. They're zapping a magic tree. And they have clothes on now. And this has, I think, 3 books in it. A Private Cosmos, Behind the Walls of Terra, and The Lavalite World. No, those titles ring a bell. I am certain that they had different covers. Different Boris Vallejo covers. Boy, oh boy. So that would be, I guess, these were done for this series. I don't recall these covers being, either one of them being on the mass markets. Boy, I'm out of my depth here. It's been a while since I revisited Farmer's work. I will now do this, and then I will move on to everything else. To Your Scattered Bodies Go, to his book Lord Tiger, his sort of hypersexualized adaptation of Tarzan. I will go on to a whole bunch of them, and we'll see. We'll see what I find. And then I think that's it for science fiction. Yes, that's it for science fiction. The next one is a UK trade paperback I love UK trade paperbacks. They're bigger. They seem heftier. The paper is a little stiffer. I wish that American trade paperbacks were made that way, and that a new release came that way. $12 paperback in really good shape, and if you really want the hardcover, well, a batch were made for libraries and collectors. So if you really want the hardcover, you can order it. But most people don't. Most people don't care one way or another. They want the cheapest version. I firmly believe that if you came out with, the Space Pirates of Dimwitty, and instead of making it a $29.99 hardcover from Tor or whatever, you made it a $12 paperback, you would sell out of your print run. You would make the author's career. It would be much more beneficial for them in the long run, and maybe even in the short run, than trying to make a killing off that big hardcover that no one's going to buy. It's too expensive for people. Listen to the #1 complaint that you hear from readers everywhere in any circumstance. They all say, I have a retail bookstore near me. I almost never go in there because the books are too expensive. Those are the readers. Those are your readers that you're pricing right out of your product. But anyway, nothing's expensive at the Brattle, unless you go to the 3rd floor where the collectible stuff is, but I don't ever go up there. I found a big, fat UK trade paperback of The Angel of Darkness, the follow-up, Caleb Carr's follow-up to his, again, improbable best-selling hit, The Alienist, where a turn of the 20th century psychologist, they were known as alienists at the time, takes on various cases, various, warped psychodrama cases, not knowing any of the later psychotherapy that we know, and wanting mainly to understand the perpetrator and stop the crimes. And this thing is much bigger than The Alienist. I looked around, what I wouldn't give to have The Alienist in this same UK trade paperback. I can't believe that the person who got rid of this didn't get rid of that as well, but I didn't see it. And I have The Alienist in a hardcover in this room somewhere. And this will probably make it into this room as well, even though it's a paperback. It probably will. It can very much stand a reread. I haven't reread it in years. It ends terribly. Caleb Carr botches the ending of The Alienist horribly, and I thought, okay, you took some years. You suddenly became independently wealthy from The Alienist. You certainly didn't see that coming. You read all of the reviews, most of which were positive, but some of which took you to task for shortcomings in your craft. You took that all to heart, and now for this second book, you certainly won't botch the ending. The ending is even more botched than the first one. Just a horrible, horrible thing. I'm starting to think it might be congenital to this author, because even just a few years ago, he did a book called Surrender New York, which is really, really good, except for the ending. The ending just falls apart. The whole thing just falls apart. If I remember correctly, this thing has Clarence Darrow in it. So I will rifle through it. I will put it on the list for October. Then the next one, a little bittersweet, but I ended up opting for it. I know the book fairly well, but I don't have a copy, and it's a tremendous work of scholarship. This is by the late John Boswell, and this is Same-Sex Unions in Pre-Modern Europe. This is John Boswell saying that that Christianity in broad, and also the Catholic Church in particular, the animus that they have against same-sex unions, or even recognizing that same-sex attraction happens and is natural, is fairly new. It's relatively new. That during the Middle Ages, up until just a few centuries ago, the church had all sorts of acknowledgments, tacit or overt, that men could fall in love with men, that women could fall in love with women, and they had ways of officiating those unions. And this came out. Let's see, you can see all the notes, right? He was a ferociously multilingual scholar, just ferocious figure. It's a formidable book. It met with some formidable resistance. Many historians took this to task in the pages of all the literary journals that I read. I remember that, but I also really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the experience of reading it. This is our author, who unfortunately died in the early 1990s. He died. Part of the AIDS epidemic. We lost a lot of great writers like this. A lot of them. Who knows what John Boswell would have gone on to do? Who knows? But no. What I wouldn't give to be able to recommend to you the memoir that he wrote when he was 65. What I wouldn't give to be able to do that. Okay, then this next one is in rough shape. Someone knew that it was in rough shape and put one of those library dust jackets around it to, I guess, try to stop it from deteriorating anymore. I might see what I can do with it, see if I can make it come alive a little bit better than this. This is a nice big hardcover of Long Day's Journey into Night by Eugene O'Neill. See that? The chunk of the front dust jacket is missing, and also A Long Day's Journey into what? A Long Day's Journey into Night is missing there. So I might take the cover off this and at least fix, write in and color in the rest of the title on the spine there, so that I'm not just staring at half of this on a shelf. But this is a masterpiece of a play. I think, if I remember correctly, this has a playbill in it. Oh, look at that. Oh my God, from 1973. There's our cast from 1973. Oh my. That's Laurence Olivier as Mr. Tyrone. Oh my, I can only imagine. Is that Colleen Dewhurst? Do we know, do we have Constance Cummings is Mary Tyrone. And then the eldest son, Jamie, is Dennis Quilley, and the youngest son is Ronald Pickup. Okay, all right. Fantastic. Well, this is great. I'm glad this is in here. But it's a wonderful thing to read as much as to see. You very much should see it. It's an undertaking to put on the stage, despite the fact that it's very minimal. It's just a small cast of characters. The undertaking part is that it's a behemoth for the actors to master. If you have a local production, be prepared for them to stumble or sound a little wooden, but definitely go and see it. But even if you don't, I'm sure that some streaming service out there is showing the movie version of Long Day's Journey into Night, starring Sir Ralph Richardson as Mr. Tyrone, and Katharine Hepburn at the height of her powers as Mary Tyrone. She is heartbreaking and terrifying as Mary Tyrone. And Dean Stockwell is the younger son. And who is the older son? Jason Robards, I think, is the older son. Well, it doesn't matter because Ralph Richardson and Katharine Hepburn just blow the thing away. They just blow it away. So now I have this as, a discrete hardcover. That's just fine by me. Not a lot of Eugene O'Neill's more popular plays do as much for me as Long Day's Journey into Night. So better that I have it by itself. And then finally, we're at the end here. Finally, we have a gem, something I'm so happy that I found. What have we got here? Oh, there's a metal bookmark in here. Reading is to the mind what exercise is to the body. Joseph Addison. Very nice. This is The Art of National Geographic. Way too slim. I wish it were 5 times as long. The National Geographic is known, of course, for its incredible photography, but throughout its history, including now, it also features original artwork. Amazing original artwork. And this book collects all of that, a lot of that artwork, and gives you great profiles of the artists. I'll get you some more examples here. Here is Tom Lovell, a U.S. Army air balloon. Look at that. Look at how beautiful that is. Let's do some more while we're here. Jay Matthews. There's the same spot in the desert, only during the day and at night. Incredible. How beautiful. Just incredible. Here we have Robert Hines. This is a bunny rabbit in motion. Very, very nice. Oh, I'm going to have so much fun going through this thing. Just so much fun. Some of you may remember historical illustrations. They've been quite, yeah, something like this. There's Tom Lovell again. Something like that. Some of you may remember that from your National Geographics. In fact, I have a few National Geographic books here. The Book of Greece and Rome, and the Book of the Renaissance. And they will have lots and lots of this artwork. This is Arthur Beaumont, light cruisers in World War II. Very nice. This will have a lot of the artwork and also biographies of the artist, which is the extra selling point for me. I can't wait. This is a browser's delight here to just go through this. I just wish that it were oversized. This is an oversized book I would definitely have gotten, and also 10 times as long. Lots and lots more art. Who knows why not, but I'll take this, definitely. And there you go. That was my trip to the Brattle this morning in shirt sleeve weather, which I doubt is going to be true in Boston for the next 10 days, maybe for the next 6 months. Could be that today is the last day, the last such day, who knows. So we have the art of National Geographic. How are we going to do this? We have Long Day's Journey into Night. Rough shape, but I will take it. We have Same-Sex Unions in Pre-Modern Europe by the late John Boswell. We have Angel of Darkness, Caleb Carr's sequel to The Alienist. We have The World of Tears by Philippe Jose Farmer, and also Three to D'Orsay, so a bunch of science fiction book club editions. We have The War of Wars, Napoleonic Wars, in a nice, pristine replacement edition. We have Marlowe's Ghost, about the man who was Shakespeare. Oh God, we're losing structural integrity here. We have Away from It All, a nonfiction memoir by the man who wrote The Man in the Grey Flannel Suit. The Best of Robert E. Howard, Volume 1. There's Conan's Tushy for you. Not be able to do this. No, let's. Then there are the mass market paperbacks. The Spell of Conan and The Blade of Conan, leaving me only one more of these things to do to get. Now Playing at Canterbury. Cannot recommend this strongly enough. If you're at your used bookstore and you see it for 50 cents, grab it. You'll love it. Desolation Island by Patrick O'Brien in a UK mass market paperback. Norstrilia by Cordwainer Smith. The Best of Cordwainer Smith, which I will clean up. The Instrumentality of Mankind, which I will also clean up. And finally, Dragon's Bane by Barbara Hamblin. So a gigantic pile of hardcovers and trade paperbacks, and a gigantic pile of mass markets. But I won't be going back to the Brattle this weekend. So, and it'll be cold. Cold weather will be coming in. This is the last, that's how I'm justifying it. This is the last trip that I can make to the Brattle in my shirt sleeves in quite some time, I would bet. Unless we get another spell of unusually warm weather. But anyway, those are all the books that I hoovered up today. There'll be more coming, I'm sure. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.